Good afternoon. Welcome to Dynamic Talks by Grid Dynamics. We're very glad to have you here. So, yeah, I hope you haven't melted until you came here. It's pretty hot. And as I said, I'm pretty happy that you had a chance to come here today. So, my name is Stefan Iljevski. I'm engineering manager for Serbia and Armenia in Grid Dynamics. And basically, I'll moderate today's meetup a bit. Speakers will take over later on. But first I'm going to try and say a few words to introduce Grid Dynamics as a company. So Grid Dynamics is a leading provider of technology consulting, engineering and data science services for Fortune 1000 companies, which means that we are developing software for top 1,000 companies in United States by Fortune magazine. Basically, we're working in financial, technological, retail sectors. We are operating since 2006, and we are headquartered in California. Our development centers are all over the world, basically in United States, Eastern and Central Europe. As of today, Grid Dynamics brings together more than 4,000 engineers in 18 countries. And basically we are growing steadily both in offices and in countries where we have offices. Also, Grid Dynamics is NASDAQ publicly listed company. So basically we are mostly working with core expertise in big data, data science, machine learning, AI, and also we have UI as one of our disciplines. And if you want to find out a little bit more about our clients, you can see on our website, these are some of the logos. And you will have a chance later on to submit your CV, share it with our recruitment, which is there. You can also talk with them to find out more if you're interested. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our speakers. So today we'll have two speakers. One of them is Katarina Đorđević, presenting NgRx state management in Angular, where you will have a chance to discover how it works. It is basically an Angular reactive extension. It enables a usage of a React Redux pattern within Angular development, and basically presentation will provide a clear explanation, and also it will be accomplished by a demo application. Also, after that, it will be Alexei, which is standing there, Bondarenko. He'll discuss micro frontends. Basically, he will tell more about challenges of managing complex monolithic front-end architectures and breaking them down into smaller independent applications. Okay, so now I would like to call Katarina, who will present first. She'll present the topic which I already mentioned. So, Katarina.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, everyone. So let me introduce myself. I'm Katarina. Some of you I know here from either my previous company or from our company. So welcome once again. As I said, I will be talking about NgRx, which is the state management in Angular, and I will try to give you an example of how it is used in some basic demo at the very end of our presentation. So, to introduce myself, I said, my name is Katarina, you know it. I work in Grid Dynamics for 2.5 years. I work at Raymond James, which is one of our customers that you see on one of the slides. I work in Angular, and before that I worked for 2.5 years as well in Angular, in the previous company in the fintech domain. I am senior specialization lead for UI discipline in Serbia, where we are establishing best practices in terms of the UI discipline in general in Grid Dynamics. So, the idea of today's presentation is to go to the key concept of NgRx, which are actions, reducers, selectors, effects, and at the very end to go through the demo. Now, before we start, I want to see who from the audience is working in NgRx. Do we have those? Wonderful. And who does not have any clue what NgRx is? Okay, we have one. At least one. Good. I hope by end of this presentation, NgRx will be more clear to you. As I said, NgRx basically allows us it's a framework for building reactive application in Angular. It allows us to manage the state. Basically, it's a state management pattern, and allows us as well some additional features which it has, such as isolation of side effects if we want to use those. Entity collection management, which is something a bit advanced, allows us to use their package for the entity for management of the collection for some crude operations which it has out of the box applied in the NgRx, router bindings, code SCLI, generation from SCLI, and DevOps tools. So basically what NgRx is the Redux pattern which is applied in Angular environment. Nothing more than that, with some specifics to the Angular environment. So when we are speaking of the Redux pattern, the main and the biggest sentence that we have about it, that it is a single source of true cold store. Basically, it means in whichever page on our application we are showing some information from the store, it should be the same one, the latest one, single source of truth. So the state itself is read-only, and it can be changed by dispatching in actions, which is one of the concepts of NgRx, and we have something called reducer, which allows us basically to react on those actions and change the state itself. Now, if we do the comparison in between NgRx store package and React Redux, we can see that NgRx cannot compete with the Redux React, but it is what it is. Basically, Redux is more familiar and more used, but we can see that the amount of the package download is increasing by the time. Now, if we want to divide into the packages that NgRx provides, and with the focus of the first three, we will be discussing more about NgRx Store, which I said, RxJS, stick management for Angular application inspired by Redux. As well, there are effects, which allows us to have our components which are pure and that doesn't have any logic of calling services, backend endpoints, and so on. Therefore, we will be using effects. We have store dev tools if we want to debug during the time and see how our state has changed. And three, not so popular, maybe because there are not enough introduction of them on their website, are the entity data and schematics. So for entity, I could say that it basically allows us, if we have certain collection, to apply the CRUD operations on it, for example, to perform those operations in the way that we don't need to do on our own, to find if some element exists, to replace it with the other one, to delete some element, to replace all, and such operations. This presentation will be on the basis of the latest version of NgRx, which is 16.0.1. So all of the examples which are covered here are basically on the latest version. Now, let's imagine one simple application that has a counter component that renders some value, basically, and that the starting value is a 0, and when user comes and clicks increase, this value is supposed to increase by 1, and so on and so on. So basically, this will be on our view, and when someone comes and clicks on the button, we are in this component, and we are going to dispatch an action. So this is basically the whole flow, how the Redux is working in the NgRx environment on the simple example. So user clicks on the button, we dispatch an action, and we are notifying reducer that something happened. What happened? We dispatched an action which can increase the amount. So we come to reducer, and reducer is there to read the value from the store, the latest one. At the very beginning, it will be initial one, 0, and to do something what we want to happen on that certain action. So it will read from the store. As I said at the very beginning, this value will be 0. And it will see, okay, you dispatch the action which is called increase the number. What I will do, I will update the store with the latest value, which is +1 to the latest one. And basically that's it. Now, on top of this is quite simple example, we could have a selector which basically allows us to get the piece of the state, which can be quite complex in the real application, and to return it back to component and to render that value. And basically that's it. This is the Redux pattern explained in this environment, which is covering this basic scenario without effects, because for effects we will come a bit later for that one. Okay, so now we went through the key concepts, but we will go now a bit more into deep how we can basically implement those things. So what is an action? An action is a unique event which happens in application, and it's up to us, developer, to decide what will be the action, of course. So speaking of the naming convention that we are going to apply, it's always best to have some feature which about this action is about, and to group all actions which are in relates to that feature. And action itself, it's basically one interface, very simple, which has type of string and nothing more. Previously, in the NgRx, in the previous implementation, we developers are creating some actions on our own, defining different types and so on. Now it's much easier because we have some functions which allow us, helper functions, to create actions easier. And with that, we are going to cover this very basic scenario of creating an action. So we will have 3 examples: increment, decrement, and reset. Here on this example, we can see that we are using helper function, create action, from NgRx store. And the only parameter that we are going to pass here is the name of that action. So it's good to have this name that is not misleading, that indicates to which component this action is about, and to indicate what we are trying to achieve with this action. So you can see here we have created this example on basis on some counter component to indicate that it's about the counter component with the name of the action, which is basically following the convention of this cons that we have created the actions. And this is pretty basic example, as I said, but recently NgRx created a new way of grouping actions. Basically, it allows us to group actions for the certain component or for the certain thing we want to group. And instead of creating 3 actions with the create action function, we can use this create action group, where for the source we are providing for which page component this is related to, and where in events we are passing the name of these actions: increment, decrement, and reset. Left side is when we are passing events as a methods. Right side is when we are passing it as a string. So we can see something additionally here that is used on this example, and this is this empty props. What does that mean? That means that I'm just going to emit an action. I'm not sending any additional payload, basically simple action. You can see on the right side of example, under the comment, this type, counter page, increment, decrement, and reset. Basically, this will be resolved if we were going to use the dev tools later on, how this action will be registered. It will take the source, and next to it, it will take the name of the method. So if we prefer to take this first way, second way of defining it with the string value, we can see that it will basically print it out in that way. If we would use the left hand value, then it will be the lowercase as the name of the methods. So those are the actions. And the good way how to create action is always to think what are the possible actions you will have in your application. It's good practice to have this action well descripted, as I said previously, because that will allow you to easy time travel during the debugging and know where and from which action you did you triggered a certain action. And you can create as many actions you want. It's up to you. It's not limited. You can define 3 and that's it. So the next topic that we are going to discuss is reducer. And as I said in that basic example, reducer is responsible for taking current or initial state, what is first of those, to listen for the actions which are happening, and to change the state on those triggered actions. The most important to say is that reducer will never override the state itself, and it has to always return the state in the way that it's new state. Why? Because when we are, once again, debugging it, we need to see the changes in the state. So we cannot override the state itself, like changing its structure right away. We need to spread through the existing state and then change the values we want to change. And as I said, it's not providing any side of effects. Therefore, we will use effects. And the naming convention will be the same, feature name.reducer.ds. So in this particular example, we previously have registered 3 actions: increment, decrement, and reset. So we are going to use a helper function createReducer. And if you recall the older versions of NgRx, basically reducer was a function that took the initial state, actions, and that was doing a switch case for each action. Now we don't need to do that because there is this createReducer. So we can see as a first parameter it takes initial state and it has on to react on all actions which are registers that we want to react on and change the state. So for example, on increment, we are taking state and action. We are returning new spreaded state, not the original one. And we are going to increase the value of the counter by 1. In case of decrement, we are going to reduce it by 1. In case of reset, we were going to set the counter value to 0, which is basically the initial state we showed on the right side. Now, how we are going to use this in our application? We need to come back to the component. And first of all, we need to have usage of the store in the constructor. In our store, you can see we have one value, which is counter of type number. We have counter variable, which is observable, and we are going to read from that value from the store. This counter equals this store.select counter. Basically, with that, we are taking from the store the value of the counter at any point. The reason why this is observable is because basically that allows us to always have the latest value, and it is on basis of the RxJS. So we are going to have 3 methods, increment, decrement, and reset, that are going to get called from the HTML of this component, which is on the right side. We can see basically we have 3 buttons with the click increment, click decrement, click reset, and we are going to call those actions from the component. What we are going to do from the component in these methods is basically to call store and dispatch new action. We are going to use those actions that are previous ones which we created. And in case we would have here on our application the value of counter which is used with the async pipe and added on our HTML, when user does any of these 3 actions, the value will get rendered at any point and it will be always the latest one. Okay, so in the previous example, you saw this line number 6 on the left side. This counter is equals this store.select and counter. What if I made the typo? If I misspelled it? Basically, I would not get the value from the store. This is not the best way of fetching the value from the store. So therefore, it's always good to create selectors and use selectors, and they allow us to basically get any piece of state we want. For that, we have 2 different kinds of selectors: create feature selectors and create selectors. Create feature selectors. Imagine you have, first of all, one complex application which consists of all products that exist on some B2B or B2C shop, and for example, we have users. So with this create feature selector, if our state is consisting of the products and all users, we could take one slice, and that is, for example, products. With this create selector, we can from that product feature selector take any of the property that product has in its state. So let's dive into very simple example to see that. Our feature state is something that we defined on our own. It's an interface with a counter of the type number. Our app state is having this feature, which is of type feature state. And imagine that app state, along with the feature, has 10 more. So in the line number 9, we are creating, by using select feature, only from the app state the value of the feature. And with this select feature counter, from this select feature, we are going to take the counter value from the feature state, which is defined on line 4. Basically, you can see with this, we are taking the slices of the state, how many we want, and we are dividing them based on the features. So the next concept that NgRx included recently are feature creators. And basically, it allows us to group whatever we have in relates to specific feature on one place. I will dive into the example right away because I guess that will be the easiest to explain. So imagine that your state is consisting of two things, products, which I previously explained about, and for example, one flag loading, which is of type Boolean. So we are going to set an initial state. Products at the very beginning will be empty array, loading will be false. With this create feature, we can basically register all reducers that are related to certain feature. In our case, we want to group all things which are related to the products from the state, and we will name it as a product. In the reducer, we are going to use, once again, this create reducer from before, where we are going to group all of the reducers that exist. This is a very simple case where we are just reacting on one of the actions, and basically we are going to change the state there. So you can see that this create feature allows us to group all of the reducers in specific to certain slice and feature of the store. In this example, that's products. Now it's up to you to see which one you prefer more. If you prefer to create one reducer for whole application and place everything for every feature on one place, or to slice it with using this create feature, I mean group it with this using create feature, it's up to you which one you prefer. But this is something that NgRx included recently, so it's kind of new thing. And it's good if you want to see everything on one page grouped together. Now, together with this, we can create as well the selectors for that. Select product state, which is from state taking this particular value that is allowing us to select product, select the loading, which are the two things which we have identified as a part of our state. And eventually, we can put it in one's const, where we are going to export the name, the all reducers, the selectors, and later on use everything there. So I don't know which one you prefer. I prefer the older way. Maybe I'm not still get used to the new one, but it's kind of handy for grouping things together. Okay, and eventually this product feature that we have created, we need to register. Imagine that you have this module. We are going to use store module for feature and register this reducer. Okay, so now we are going to dive into the effects. And as I said, our components need to be really pure in the way that they are just reading some value from the store, like an example of increment, decrement. So basically, they are reading the value of the counter, they are emitting events, and that's it. Nothing more than that. But imagine that these products that we were discussing previously need to come from somewhere, from some back-end endpoint. We need to get them, and once we get them, we need to store them somewhere. For that, we use effects. And effects are allowing us, what I said, to leave the component being pure, to leave the component only select the slice of the state, the dispatch an action, and that's it. So effect is basically listening for any action which happens, and it's always returning an action. That's important to mention because the reducer is the only one that is going to basically change our state based on the certain action. So let's imagine following example. we want to fetch some data from the backend, some products. And we have registered 3 actions. First of all, we are registering one of the events which is called load products. This action will be really simple one with no payload, with just a type, which is on the line 8, product page load products. Imagine that this is an action we previously created. And that when we call the backend, we are supposed to get some products, and we are supposed to trigger some new action which is going to update our state. So we could have 2 ways here. One way is to have success when we call the backend and to get these products and to store them into state, and the other is one if the backend fails to store the error, if we want to know which error is about. So we can see we registered the fact load products, which is using create effect. It is using these .actions. It's listening for all actions. If on line 8 we have an action which is dispatched, which is called load products, we are going to call product service on line number 9. We are going to fetch all products, and if we receive the products on line 11, we are going to emit new action, product API, product loaded success, and we can see that in the payload we are going to place those products that we receive from the backend. But in case of error, we are going to get into catch block, we are going to emit new action, product API, product loaded error, and we are going to store that error in our state. So basically that's it. As you see, it allows us not to call the service from the component to get the products. It allows us to create basically certain class product effects, which is representing this call to the backend and returning new actions. So the next thing to say that, which I suggest you to do and to add on your project, is to add this Redux DevTools. It's nothing like related to Angular. This is a regular Redux DevTools. On the right side, you can see QR code for the download. Basically allows us to track the state changes, to track actions, to track everything. And it allows us to see how our state is changing. It has really good visualization. So in order for you to apply it in your application, you need to first of all install this extension, which is provided on this QR code. You need to install the NgRx store DevTools package in your project using npm install save dev, the name of this package, and you need to add the usage of it in app.ts. Okay, I'm giving colleague a moment for QR code. Thank you for scanning. Now I know that it was useful. Okay, so in order for us to basically allow our Angular application to be connected to this store DevTools module, we need to register it in our app module. So we are going to use this store dev modules package. We are going to say .instrument, and there are some things that you don't need to provide here. But for example, one of the interesting and useful one, log only, on the line number 7, is that you are just logging in some restrictive manner. Autopose is there with a flag true or false if you want to autopose when the user is not in the windows of the application. Trace if you want to include the stack and trace every dispatch action, true or false. Trace limit amount of these things, but not all of these need to be provided. You can only use store DevTools module.instrument, and that's it for allow you to connect your application with the store. Okay. Now, when it's useful to use NgRx and when not? I mean, it depends on your application. If your application is having the value which is shared across many different tabs, many different places in application, and in particular in Angular, if you have a parent-child relationship and you have among one parent 10 childs that are passing with the input some value and so on and so forth, then it's better to use state. In that case, you were just going to subscribe to the store from selector to read the value, and it's quite easier. That's the first example. The second example is when everyone needs to know about some change. So, for example, if I am on some web shop and on every single page I need to know amount of the products which I added to my cart, of course, that will be one of useful example. And it has great tooling. As I said, this dev tools is quite useful for you to basically debug during the time and to understand how something has changed. Now, when not to use it, I guess you are looking for these examples as well. If you are pretty new to the Angular, if you're just getting started learning Angular, I suggest you to understand first the key concepts, the observables, input, and the communication in Angular itself, and not to start with the NgRx, because that will be a lot of pain at very beginning. If your team has already created very good implementation of managing the state in some way and notifying components about any change, yes, as well that could be a good example. And as I said, if your application is quite simple, you're just practicing and you don't have so many components that are communicating that you don't need to share the state all the time, then yes, that could be one example as well. Now we are going to look into one example, the demo. And for visualization standpoint, I'm going to show you how the project is divided in which pieces. The header component, pretty static component, you will see it has the name of this dynamic talk. We are going to have list of available products, all products that exist. We are going to have a user profile, and this is going to be like single page application just for the purposes of understanding how can we set up these things, how can we group actions and so on. And we will fetch the data from the user profile. We are going to create actions that will basically allow us to use this list of available products and add them to our cart, and on basis of that, to display the amount in our cart. What we are going to do in this example, I mean, I already did this, so we are not going to do everything of this, but just for the purposes of explaining this demo application that was preset for us, for the list of available products, we are going to call backend to get products and to return those. So as I said, for communication with some external things, with endpoints, we are going to use effect, and for that I have registered an effect for fetching the products. Same applies for the user profile. I'm going to call the backend endpoint to get the data about the user that is going to return me some data that I'm going to add into the store. And imagine this is our application, of course. So what would be steps for you if you just get started and this is your idea of example application, how you are going to create it? So first of all, I would say start from the actions. I explained you that we have fetching of the products, fetching of the user data. So therefore, we can create different actions. First of all, we are going to create an action that is going to call backend endpoint. Then we are going to create an action that when the endpoint is giving us success, to have some payload and to update the state. And in case of error, we are going to as well update the state in that manner. That's the first thing that we are going to have. Then you are supposed to create the state and set initial state. So in our case, our state is going to consist of the products, available products, about the user data, about some flag loading, in case we are waiting for backend. And that's it. Then we are going to create selectors that are allowing us to select the pieces of the state. In case of the products, we are going to create a selector to fetch the products. In case of user, we are going to create selector to fetch the user data and specific user data information with the selectors themselves. Then we need to create, of course, reducer, because without reducer, actions and everything is useless. So we are going to create reducer for each of the state changes reacting on those actions. Then optional, as I said, you can create a fact that is going to provide you to call the backend. But if your application does not need that, that you are not operating in that way, that you need to call some backend, you can skip that part. The next one, we need to register our reducer in the app module in order for everything to work. And then we are going to update the components, to use selectors to read these state slides, and to basically use the stored and emit certain actions from the components itself. And additionally, on top of that, if you want to debug everything, it's good to set up these DevTools in order to see which every action was emitted and how the state was changed. Okay, so this is about the presentation itself, and now I'm going to do the demo for you. So, just give me a second to make a setup of this. Okay, so let's start first of all from the application itself. As I said, it's divided into 3 different components. The first one, header, it's pretty static with the name of this presentation. The second one is list of the available products. The last one is the user profile data with available products in the cart. Okay, so I was playing around before this presentation, but this is how it will look for the users when they start with using applications. So you can see here that everything that we are reading here is basically coming from the store because it is set up in that way. These products are already rendered because we called the backend endpoint and we rendered the data about them. This user data profile is already there because we called backend endpoint and fetched the data about this user. And the only thing which is not rendered by any call to endpoint is this total, which is basically be on the basis what we add to the cart. Okay, so let us go to application and I will show you how I did it because everything is already in place. I hope you could see this. So I have created different actions depending on what I want to achieve. Now let us start with the fetching the data about the user. So I have created one action using this create action, which is load user, and it's simple action. You see no payload, nothing is passed here. And the purpose of this action would be to go to effect, to notify effect that I want to fetch the data from the backend. If the backend return me the success, I'm going to emit the new action, which is this one, load user success. And here you see something that you didn't see in the presentation because the presentation for increment, decrement, and reset was an easy one, but for sending any payload from the action, we are registering with props and we are defining what we are passing as a payload from that action. So in case of success, I'm going to get an active user from the backend, and I'm going to do something with it. If the backend were to return me an error, I'm going to store that error in my state, and basically the same applies for the loading available products, loading available product success, and error. So the logic is pretty straightforward. And okay, so let's see, we have this load user action, and let's see what and how we are using it. So we have registered an effect, the shop effect, which is combining all effects on application. You can divide it in the different features if you want so. And basically, it's subscribing to the actions which are happening in our application. It's looking for some action. In this particular case, we are looking for the action called load user. When we get this action, we are going to call the backend. And in case of the data being fetched, we are going to emit new action, load user success. We are going to pass the user that we got from the backend. And in case of error, we are going to just render back that error. Okay, so that's basically it. And now the question is how we are going to change the state when we are going to get the products or users from backend endpoint. So for that purposes, we are going to go to the reducer itself. And we can see that our shop state consists of the product list, of errors, of active user, of loading value. Not all are needed at this point. That we have set initial state to be this one for very beginning, and that we have a list of all reducers and changes of the state here. So in case, so we are using this create reducer that takes initial state, and in case we have a meeting in action, load user success, we are going to get the state, the current state, an action. We said that this action is going to get the payload, which is the active user, which is the value we retrieve from the backend, and nothing complex, but we are just basically going to return existing state by spreading to it, and we are going to set active user value to the one which we got from the action. For the error case, basically we are not going to touch the active user, we are just going to render we are going to store that error, and that's it. Same applies for the fetching the data from the backend in case of the list of available products. So for that one, we have load products, create effect, if any action is emitted with load available products, and
recording in progress.
Products, I'm going to emit yet a new event, action, or in case of error, I will do this. And basically, that's all. If I go to the reducer for this one, we can see on load available product success, I'm going to add these products here, and I'm going to set the flag to false because I created a logic that is basically creating this loading flag to true when we are waiting for backend to respond, but it's not needed for the case of this example, and same applies in case of the error. So basically, getting back to application, we now rendered list of the products that we showed here. We now rendered the user data. Now we are going to see what is going on when we click on Add to Cart. So for that to look into, we need to go into component which is responsible for this action. So here in our component we have one button, Add to Cart, and for each product we have this button. So we are going to go into the component itself. We have Add to Cart method here, and we are basically emitting one action with output, because this is like an inner component that is going to output component. But in general, this action is going catch from the shop component, and it's dispatching an action, and it is dispatching an action Add to Cart. Now, let's look at this Add to Cart. The Add to Cart is an action which is supposed to add some product to the cart of this particular user. It's going to have a payload of product, the one on which we clicked. And if we look into our reducer, and if we go to this Add to Cart logic, basically, I have created a logic that if the product is already added, not to repeat, and not to have any amount of added product just for the sake of simplicity. But basically, we are going to take an active user. We are going to go to the list of the products. We are going to look if this product exists in his list of the product. If it exists, we are going to return state, meaning we are not going to change anything. If he added MacBook Pro, that's it, you bought it, that's all. But in case he didn't add this MacBook Pro or any other product, we are going to change the list of products which are for this particular user by sending this product. And in action, this looks like this. I'm going to Add to Cart, and this profile page is basically listening to list of all available products. In which way? If we return back to this user profile component, we can see that here we are looping through the list of cart products for this particular user, and we are going to basically display the information about these products, their price, and we have additional functionality which is removed from the cart. So I can go back here, I can add several products, whatever I want, and you can see that this value here is rendering on basis what product we added. Basically, it's a simple logic, counting what products I have in list of available products, and basically have this value. Now, this is very simple application. As I said, this is application on one page, but it demonstrates an example of using state management inside some larger and more complex application where the state needs to be read from its latest value, and it has to be updated on any action that user does. So if I would click here, you can see that all components underlying are basically changing its value, meaning that this state management NgRx is allowing us basically to track of all changes. Now the usage of this extension, I can show you. Basically, I registered it in the way how I shared with you, and we can see how action happened from very beginning. So first action that happened is load products from server. This is a regular action of type load product from server, doesn't have any payload. So we called backend, we got product. We can see that we have this action after that one, load products from server with success, and we can see what is the product that we got. And if we look here in the state, in the chart, we can basically see what the state is consisting from, but this is really tiny, so I won't click too much on it because I guess for the people who are following from the Zoom link, it will be difficult to follow. But basically, you can see that this dev tools is pretty handy, pretty convenient, because every action that is getting dispatched is visible here. And it's displaying how the state is changing. And that's why I said we are never changing state itself, but we are always returning back the new state. And that's why we are seeing these changes here. And whatever I do further, you will see that it's going to be registered with this. So it's quite useful, and I recommend using it because in the way complex application, you can easily lose from where someone changed some state, and you will have to debug it a lot to be able to find out what happened. In this way, it's pretty straightforward for you to analyze what are the changes that happened and how your state is changed. Now, getting back to application, to the presentation itself, I hope this example was something that allowed you to understand the really basic level of usage of NgRx. We started from very simple example, increment, decrement, reset. We touch base on some more advanced example of using it in some scenario of some web shop, but you can basically see what is the power of it. You can see these new features that they introduce, these helper functions that allow you to create these actions, to create the reducers easily. And I hope this presentation was useful for you in order for you to understand this concept. Now I'm leaving you these links, official documentation of NgRx and the Redux pattern, which is not from NgRx, but is from the Redux itself. So now it's time for questions and answers, and I am looking for people who are as well following us on Zoom and as well from the ones who are in the office to ask whatever question you have.
So we're going to begin from, we're going to begin from the office. So if there is any questions, does anybody want to ask something? Not for now, okay. Let's go with Zoom then. I'm going to read them out, and sorry guys, I'm not technical, so I may make some mistakes. 1 second. So, question for 19th slide. I'm just wondering, is state a param or frozen object to prevent mutation inside reducer function? As far as I know, previously developers had to use immutables or some alternatives to prevent accidental mutation inside reducer function or somewhere else? Probably new NgRx version can handle it, question mark.
Okay, so as you can see from this example, it's up to you to define how you are changing the state. So it's the best practice for you to not change the state itself by returning the state itself with the changing of the values, because in that way you will just lose the point of this immutability as a concept. So it's up to you to define, to write it in this way, and this is the best practice. I mean, you cannot avoid it by doing it differently. If you do it differently, then the NgRx itself will lose its point. Okay?
1 second. Okay. Any tips on code organization practices when using NgRx for heavy enterprise solution?
Okay, so how I would recommend you is basically to have your features, components, and to have the actions which are in relation to specific feature component grouped on one side. So not to have a list of bunch of all actions that are in your application. In that way you are going to lose which one you are wanting to change or just to manage them. So the best is to keep for each slice of the state one folder which is called store, inside it to create the actions for that piece of state, reducers in registering in the way how we explained it here.
Second. A question about effects. When to use merge map or switch map or exhaust map or exhaust map or merge map in create effect? Please give some examples.
Okay, so this good question, because this is basically the question that comes from NgRx and the difference between switch map and merge map. Basically, it depends if in this particular example, we use the merge map. If I'm not mistaken, I will go back to the example itself of the effect. Yes, the merge map. The merge map is allowing you to cancel any of the previous in case the new one came, so you will have the latest value. It relates with the switch map. Exhaust map I never used. I always use merge map, and it's displayed by their recommendation from their usage of effects, so that's why I use it always in that way.
1 second. So the last question from Zoom. When I create effect with HTTP request logic, this effect listens to action which can be dispatched in many components. Either HTTP request will be invoked multiple times within my route surfing, or just one time when I open one of these components, question mark.
Just one time. So you're here subscribing to all actions, and if this action comes only once, you dispatch it only once, it's going to get there, it's going to call this service just once, not several times. But if you create several actions which are of purpose of loading products, and you are dispatching them randomly on 5-6 places, yes, this effect is going to register all of those, and synchronously it will update the state in this way. It will call the backend endpoint in so many times you basically dispatched it. But you can use take one, for example, from NgRx to take first value. You can upgrade this. This is basically just a simple example of effect creation.
If there are any questions from Zoom, go ahead and ask. And if there are any questions from the office? Nope? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I will be giving the voice now to my colleague, Alexei, who is going to speak about micro frontends.
Everybody can hear you now, so go ahead.
So Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our presentation. And today's presentation is about a very revolutionary approach for modern web development. It's micro frontends. Since in a world where application becomes increasingly complex, micro frontends offers a scalable and modular solution by breaking down the complex monolithic application into smaller, independently releasable applications or units. So today we'll talk about benefits of micro frontends, we will discover some real-world examples, and we'll talk about innovational architecture patterns. My name is Alexey Bondarenko. I'm senior UI developer in Grid Dynamics, but you can call me Alex. Sound like from the Breaking Bad, yeah. But you can call me Gus. Yeah. Anyway, so what's the plan? Today we'll talk about, firstly, about what are micro frontends. Then we will discuss the advantages of it, how could we split our applications, a bit of memes to make our conversation more softer, and the most delicious part, proof of concept, in the end of my presentation. So let's start. As you may know, there are some, or you have some backend colleagues that are discussing something like microservices in the kitchen or something else. So basically, the push of micro frontends has brought about the implementation to the modern web form to the micro frontends. As you may know, we could look into micro frontends as a feature-based architecture pattern where we got several teams, and each team handles its own application part or independent releasable bundle. So you could tell me, wow, the presentation has just started, but you already break us down by hard stuff. Okay, we're breaking down this hard stuff with a bunch of memes, as I said earlier. So basically, in two words, micro frontends, it's a similar concept to microservices that could be divided into different models, for example. And adapting the micro frontend approach to build your application possibly is one of the best solutions because it allows you to improve performance of the application, make it scalable, flexible, and get another very cool things. But first things first, let's talk about how could we create our first micro frontend application and how could we create application which will consist from other small parts. Well, you can use some long-standing solution, such as web components, such as linked page and SPAs, such as single space, or, forgive me, front-end developers, iframes, for example. Yeah, and but today I would like to tell you about a really modern and really modern tool that we are using in the production. It's called module federation. So I would like to quote the words of maintainer of module federation as well as Webpack, Zach Jackson. So he said that module federation is a new killer feature for Webpack 5 that allows you to point-to-point connect other modules from another Webpack bundle and assembly allocated from the different costs. So on this slide, you can see the goals that Zach set it up for himself to develop this feature. So, for example, he wanted to create some components that avoid switching between models while page reloads. He would like to avoid also vendor lock. That means that you could avoid some packages that you are created from one application and you can reuse it from another. And of course, that each micro frontend could be launched by a standalone SPA and other cool stuff which you not necessary to read. And you can ask me, did the result exceed the expectations? And yeah, the result is really exceeds. So what can model federation do? Let's talk about it. Each micro frontend can have its own repository, independent builds, and deployments, as I said earlier. And micro frontends could be launched as a standalone SPA in a browser, and everything will work like a monolithic application, but it's not. Roughly speaking, micro frontends allows you to combine two Webpack manifests and at runtime, that's important, and make them work together as you compiled it from the very beginning. So this was really interesting for me and for my team, and we decided to try it. But first of all, we need to understand the basic concepts of model federation. As far as you know, first of all, we got a host application. That's common. So host application allows you to create your basic application, which will run firstly in your browser. As you can guess, the second part is a consumable application or remote application. So this part will be consumed by a host application and share his models to the host and work in combination of two applications. The third part is the most interesting part. It's omnidirectional host. That means that this part could be both the host and the remote application in the same time. So you could create like tree structure of your micro frontend application, and each of them will work independently. Also, we have exposed models. It's features like you can share some styles, images, fonts, anything. And also you got shared models. Basically, models could be shared across entire applications, such as frameworks, NPM packages, and other stuff such as React, Bundle, Angular, Vue, anything. So how could we connect our application, our models, small models, and build the whole application? Basically, all we need to do is import model federation plugin to our Webpack config and connect it to our two applications. For example, initially we will have two applications, host and remote. Both of them we will connect model federation plugin and determine remotes which will, So in the host we will determine which models did we expect from the remote, and in the remote we will determine which models should we expose. For example, we were expecting that remote shared for the root application header component. Then we need to create an initialization function that will initialize our Webpack bundle, and or you can do a simple script injection in your HTML file with a remote entry, but Webpack allows you import functionality. Webpack contains import functionality, so it allows you to import it dynamically. And basically, that's all. Because all you need to do is create an entry point in your host application and create some content part, for example, a header or something, another container, in your remote application. Yeah, in my example, remote application is below than the host application, but that doesn't mind, because basically in the browser we got two applications that bundled from different manifests. And you can ask me, Alex, you can tell us about some merits of this approach, and did we have any flaws? Of course we do, because we don't have any approach that contains only pros and without any cons. So basically, we need to integrate our new solution to our production. We are able to, how to say, we need to change globally our CI/CD processes. We need to rebuild our architecture from DevOps team. We need to synchronize with them, and it's a very heavy and huge process. So also you need to be careful with vendor lock. That means that you possibly may import, for example, different versions of React or Angular in different parts of your model federation, but possibly that they could be locked by some updates. So model federation plugin share you possibility to import one piece, one package of and one version of React application or another framework to your host application and share it with shared models. And another big problem is the memory usage. So that's a really huge problem. Of course, as you may know, we are building static versions, and the static versions in the cloud much consumed less memory, but imagine if you need to debug or develop, for example, at least six models like I have in a screenshot. It will eat all of your memory, so you can see that use it around 80% of my memory, and that's the problem. But a possible solution is to go to the store and buy a more powerful computer or laptop. I'm joking. So the possible solution is connect another plugin, which called external remotes plugin, which allows you to connect different parts of your application dynamically in a runtime and change it on the fly. For example, you are storing your static manifests in the cloud. You are sharing the link for your root application with determine some URLs, for example, in a global config, or creating a fetch function to proceed it, for example, in a promise. And then you can use just build it application versions and work with it. Also, this solution allows you to manage your application across multiple environments. For example, if you can change one build to another at any time, it could save if your production was broken and you can switch one component to another on the fly. And user didn't need to do, should to do nothing because you are changing it on the fly. Yeah. What about our project? We're creating a room planner, and what advantages have we found while we dive into this approach? So first of all, the main task was to improve the performance of our application by connecting modern technologies, and we decided to connect model federation plugin because we have at least several components such as header, such as side menu bar, main application with a canvas which allows you to create a 3D product view or measure your room and create a virtual mock-up. So we decided to split our application into smaller parts, and here's a small scheme. As you may see, this is the whole of our application, and this is our team, and we are looking upset because we are trying to avoid merge conflicts. We are trying to split our task and work in some independent models, but it's really hard. And then we decided to split our application, and this, as I said earlier, and we could provide a smaller tasks to the different team. For example, one team works on the header component, the second one works on a catalog or gallery or shopping cart, doesn't matter. And everything is good, everyone is happy. So, but also it's everything is merged and connected to single data storage by Redux. And it allows you to connect different models without any pain, such as integrate with third-party libraries or third-party developers and connect to your application some 3D options or AI engine without any pain. So they need just to import, you need just to add one entry point to your application. They need just to give you a link where they stored an entry file for their application. And what performance improvements we have found? So I could say that the transition to MFE allowed us to improve the performance of our application in more than 2 times. Because initially we loaded a very huge and heavy HTML bundle. Initially, it was about 7,000 rows. That's crazy. And after some scalable operations with the Model Federation plugin, we decreased this amount of initial bundle by 2 times. So I think that's a great results. In conclusion, I would like to say that we continue to improve in our application, and Model Federation opens new opportunities for us for integrating and dividing our application, for integrating with different teams. And of course, this is a great experience that will appear, I believe, more and more often in modern applications. Thanks for your attending. That's a QA time.
One second. Does anybody have any questions from the office? Nope, got it. And we have one question. We have one question from Zoom, which is, does Module Federation work for SSR, server-side rendering?
Yes, it does. So I believe this will be the next topic of my presentations. I read an article of Zach Jackson yesterday, and he mentioned that he created some manipulation to work with SSR. So I believe, yeah, it works fine in the production.
So just one second. Okay. Was the decrease of number of lines directly proportional with performance increase?
Yeah, but there are 2 reasons of performance increase. First of all, we a bit refactor our old application. And the second one, we are connected modern solutions such as React to avoid rendering of unnecessary code. So in our case, yeah, that's help us to improve the performance. But in your case, please be careful with the connecting models, because if you connect too much models, if you're creating without any profit to you, just as you want, so it may decrease your performance. That's true.
Are you using the same framework, React, for all micro frontends?
Yeah, yes, we do. But you may use any frameworks on any types of your models. For example, the first model you can build it with, for example, header will be written with Angular, catalog page will be written with React. For example, shopping cart will be written with a Vue.js.
And how is Redux communicating between MFE packages?
Very simple. As I said earlier, we got exposed models and shared models. So we create an instance of Redux store. We create a date stamp to avoid of cloning of the Redux instances, and connect point to each application by exposed models. And that works fine. But first of all, we ran into problem when Redux cloned itself for one instance per one model. For example, if we take this example, we will reach for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Redux instances. Yeah, it's too crazy. So you need to make some manipulations to synchronize imports, and that will work fine. Only one storage of data for all application.
Is there any more questions from Zoom? And is there any questions from here? 1 second. Let me give you the mic.
Does this affect end-to-end testing on some way?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
Does this make some issues with end-to-end testing of application?
With the testing of application, yeah, that's maybe no. So in a production, we're using end-to-end testing, and it's really easy to test with a framework from AQA team. But you can also use Jest, for example, in your project and run your models independently. Like I said, it's standalone SPAs. You can use it like standalone web applications, anything. So I think not.
Any more questions? No? Okay. That's it.
So thank you guys. Thanks for attending. This was our official part of our presentations. Hope we meet in the future. Thank you all.